Welcome to Global Guardians Studio Sessions. I'm Mario Dacoa.
I'm Trent Underwood, and make sure to like and subscribe and leave a review so that you can stay up to date on all of our latest podcast episodes. So what are we talking about today?
Well, Trent, I'm glad you asked. First of all, bom dia.
Bom dia.
Bom dia, which means good morning in Portuguese, which is a hint as to our topic today.
Yeah, we're speaking Brazil. We're talking Jaguars, and specifically our adventure to the Pantanal and what it took to pull that off.
That's right. In 2022, in July, we went to the northern Pantanal to film Jaguars in probably one of the most famous locations for Jaguars. This location is renowned for the number of Jaguars you're going to see and for behavior such as hunting. And these Jaguars, they don't just hunt any normal prey. They hunt what?
They hunt caiman.
Caiman.
Which is cool that you have two apex predators that you wouldn't imagine would be at each other, but that is the case.
That is the case. And this is the spot. This is the spot. So this trip was, I think, one of our most highly anticipated trips.
I agree, yeah.
That we prepared for a long time. We're very excited for. And this episode of Studio Sessions, we're going to talk about what it took to actually film Jaguars in the Pantanal, from testing gear to the people that we had on the grounds with us, the experts in the field that we worked with. And, we're going to highlight some of our favorite moments, some of our least favorite moments.
There's some of those, for sure.
Yeah. So let's start off with time frame. July 5th through 15th, 2022. That was our actual trip.
Yes, yep. And we had, and the reason why we chose that time specifically is because of the water level. And the water level needs to be very low to help that concentration of jaguars to be in a smaller area. Otherwise, we wouldn't be able to cover that type of ground. And there would be a lot more like bigger rivers rather than small little narrow canals. So by that low water level, you concentrate the jaguars and the caiman, allowing them to have a closer kill area. Our fixer, Fabiano, had said this is a good time to come. And we just started the pre-production like months before that. But specifically July 5th, and we did a week, which later we'll get into why maybe 2 weeks would have been ideal. But these are the things that we learned and are part of pre-production.
Yeah, correct. And that's a very good point, Trent. To film Jaguars in the Pantanal, the best time to go is the dry season, which starts in July, peak August, September. That's generally when you see a lot of people going because, as you mentioned, water levels are down. The Jaguars concentrate along the rivers where the water is going to not completely go away, right? It's not going to ever dry up, but they concentrate around the rivers because that's where their prey items are going to be. So July was a trip, but we started testing gear way in advance, in May.
Well, even before that, I want to say it was probably January, February when we had initially started talking with the team, like, is this trip doable? What is the logistics? What is the budget? What is the cost? Which is always how you should start a production. Don't dive in unless the budget's there and
right.
It's feasible.
And let me preface this by saying one of the goals of this trip was basically film Jaguars as cinematic as possible, like BBC.
Yep.
But with a fairly small budget and not a lot of time.
Exactly. And what really made us be able to do this is that we did have a lot of equipment to be able to pull it off. Because when BBC filmed this, I forget if it was 7 Worlds, One Planet or Planet Earth, but they had, I think, 2 boats and they had a shot over on a big crane so that they could get out over top of some of the other boats to make it seem a lot more remote, which we quickly learned while we were there. It's not the case. But yeah, we had, when we did Animal Planet back in 2018, end of 2018, beginning of 2019, there was a lot of equipment that we had to purchase to pull those shoots off over the world. And some of that equipment was like a Movi Pro, which is a gimbal system that can support a fairly large rig. And we bought that back then. And we hadn't used it a whole lot in the last couple of years because we hadn't had a shoot that warranted it. And this was the opportunity. And so as I started digging through the gear closet, I'm like, okay, well, what do we have that we can use already to pull this off? And the Movi being the most expensive piece was a key item. And then when you're filming on a boat or you're filming car stuff or anything where there's unsteadiness, a gimbal's not enough. You need what is called like a Russian arm, and it kind of looks, sticks out like this mic stand, and it's got springs and shock systems, and you hook your gimbal onto that, and then as that boat's rocking and changing, it's keeping your Z-axis or your horizon level at the same point so that you're not going whoosh, 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 and you're not rocking side to side. So that was really the only piece of equipment we had to purchase, which wasn't too bad compared to everything else. But we had Teradeks for wireless monitoring. We had a Nucleus M for pulling focus. And we had all the cables and monitors and everything. So we really only had to get one piece of gear.
Gotcha.
So go ahead.
Yeah. So the gear component, very important.
Because I can keep going.
I want you to do that because one of my favorite parts of this trip was you brainstorming every day at the office, brainstorming the rig, setting it up with the components, but also like building stuff with your 3D printer. Mm-hmm. But let's get into that in a second, because first I want to introduce the people involved on this trip. So pre-production, of course, is very important. And the most successful trips are the ones that we have the right people on the ground that are our fixers or helping us. So people involved. First of all, Fabiano Oliveira, right? He is from the founder, CEO of Biodiverse Brazil Tours. So essentially, he was our tour guide, but more so like the person that made it possible to film because he had a boat. And as we're going to find out, you communicated a lot with him to get measurements and such. Fabiano, super enthusiastic, super fun to work with. He's a biologist, ornithologist, and like I said, founder of the Biodiverse Brazil Tours. His boat driver, Valdo, crucial as well. He knew how to navigate through the waters, avoid other boats. Of course, April Kelly from Conservation Wild, a good friend of ours. She's the one that essentially helped conceptualize the entire trip, introduced us to Fabiano, and helped set up everything.
Yeah, I think it was initially her, right, that started the ball rolling, and she suggested Fabiano.
Yep. Shout out to April Kelly for sure.
And was it Instagram that you guys had initially started talking about this, or did she email you? I can't remember how the ball started rolling.
You want to know why?
Yeah.
Because in 2020, I totally forgot about this. In 2020, remember the big fires that were occurring in Brazil?
Oh, right. And we were there part of it. Was it 2020? Or because remember we were on in the Pantanal, not the Pantanal, but we were in Brazil when the fires were
That was
raging.
in 2019. Okay. So those fires, which happen every dry season, but in 2020, peak lockdown, there was a huge fire, right, throughout most of Brazil and the Amazon and Pantanal. I remember we were doing these live streams. Remember the Ask a Biologist live streams? Somehow they contacted us, April. We raised money for
That's right.
the Pantanal. Totally forgot about that.
Yeah, and that's what started the conversation. Like, hey, you guys got to get down here and experience this.
Yeah, so we helped raise money, which they were very grateful for, is particular for the Pantera organization, right? Yeah. That's how we initially met April and kept in contact with her. And then, of course, she introduced us to Abby Martin, who is the zoologist, founder of the Jaguar identification process. So she was the biologist that we kind of were showcasing in the eventual episode. So now that the players are set, pre-production, as we mentioned, began very early on. Biggest challenge, we're going to be on a moving boat. Mm-hmm. So Trent, you began envisioning the rig, building it out. Discuss your process. Discuss the frustrations. Discuss how you started to, set it up.
I'll try to compact 6 months worth of work into a few minutes. But as I said earlier, we had some of the equipment from Animal Planet and only had to buy a couple things. But the challenges were that we have a boat that we can't be on until we're there. and we need some poles and we need some rigging equipment to be able to hang that Russian arm and that the gimbal off of. And so I had to work very closely. I messaged Fabiano after we had started the initial pre-production with him, and I said, can I get detailed photos of your boat? I need detailed measurements. And he sent me the first photo, and I saw there was like almost umbrella poles or holes in the center of the boat. I'm not quite sure what they exactly were for, canopies maybe. And I was like, perfect. We have like a center hole to put a pole in, like our mast. And we needed some stabilizer poles to go off to the side. So I, thankfully, the guy that actually built his boat, he works with regularly, and had said he can weld together a pipe. And so a standard speed rail is what is used in the industry. That's like a standard size that most clamps and everything go on to. And the Russian arm needed to have that speed rail size. So the hole was like 2 inches, so we needed an adaption. So I said, can you weld together an adaption to get us, I believe it's 1.25 inch speed rail, and then there's, I think, 2-inch speed rail. And I need that adaption. And so he's like, yeah, no problem. And so he put that pole together, put it in, and then he sent me the photo, and I was like, all right, I think it's going to work. I think at least we know that's there. And I said, we'll bring some ratchet straps to help even further tighten down that pole to keep it from moving. So we did buy a couple Matthews speed rail clamps, like swiveling speed rail clamps, that allowed us to then hook to the side of the boat using also C-clamp. So we're using all these little things and grip pieces. So we had C-clamps that had that allowed us to put the speed rail adapters on. And then we had our mast basically, and it kind of looked like a pirate ship. Like we needed our pirate ship mast. So when because essentially we are making a smaller version of the equipment that BBC is using, because BBC is using what when they're getting these fantastic shots? Cranes, shot overs, which is a gimbal system that's all contained, and then they're using arms as well, stabilizer arms. Big equipment, multiple different people, multiple boats. And our Fabiano was actually on the river when they were filming that, so he saw the whole setup. A lot of people did. But yeah, so we get down there. We got all of our equipment, so we knew that it worked. So that was exciting to know that piece was successful in the pre-production. Now the rig itself, that was extremely complex because the Movi came out in 2018, 2019.
What is a Movi?
The Movi's the gimbal. Okay. The stabilizer system that keeps the camera level on the horizon, so you can move it in any direction. I think everyone at this point, I would assume, is familiar with the gimbal. You've probably seen somebody running around at a wedding or an event with a handheld Ronin.
DJI.
DJI, yeah. I mean, you got Jihuan Crane, which is another gimbal, and then you got a couple other knockoff gimbals, but it's pretty much DJI is running.
Shout out to DJI.
DJI's running it. So yeah, the rig was. Let me set what the camera system was. So we had the Sony FX3. And we had the Sony 200-600 because we needed as much reach as possible. Both lenses we owned. There are other longer lens options, but the rental fees were high or purchasing was just out of range.
But Fabiano recommended that the 200-600 was just the right focal length because we needed that 200 at the wide end.
Yep.
And anything further, actually, sometimes we were too close to the Jaguars.
Yeah. And oftentimes we were able to get what we kind of envisioned with that 200-600 because we were far closer to the Jaguars than we may have thought. But yeah, so we needed a way to power all of the pieces and components. So we had a Teradek, which a Teradek is the wireless video transmitter. So that's sending the video from the camera wirelessly to my monitor and your monitor. So we needed to have a way to power that, and we needed to have a way to power the camera, ideally in a one battery system so that we can just quickly swap everything out and we're not powering the Teradek by this battery and that battery, therefore adding weight and complexity. So how can we make this rig as easy as possible because it's just me and you, and as quick to undo and set up?
Yeah, because to your point as well, like we have to, every time we finish filming, right, we have to take the camera off and then put it back on the boat. And so you want a system that you could just plug and play, essentially. Once you've got that mast, as you're saying, right, And not to mention as well, we're traveling with a lot of gear. So we also want to minimize how many check bags and how
Yep.
much stuff we're hauling around. So it was very intricate dance that you were doing.
Yep. And so when we had gotten the initial like setup planned, I was like, okay, we got to get a Terra deck on there. We got to get the FX3. We got to get the 200, 600. And we also needed the ability to zoom wirelessly and focus wirelessly. And the biggest problem with a 200 to 600 or any photography lens or photography based lens is you don't have hard stops and you don't have those nice geared teeth that a cinema lens has. Like our Canons or Zines or like a Zeiss Prime, something like that. Whereas when you're putting that nucleus M on there and you hit the calibrate button, it hits these hard stops. So the focus only has a certain range to hit, and the zoom has a certain range to hit. And when it gets there, then the calibration software says, okay, I can't go any further. And then like when you're spinning it, you can't overshoot. And the problem with the photography lenses, it's like an infinite focus, and like the ring just spins and spins and spins. So what do? You have to calibrate its range. So that was a bit of a challenge because it's not a ideal system. So, and not many people are going to be using it in this fashion. So I had to 3D print custom rings to be able to slide over top of that Sony to 200 to 600. And I had to do adapters because on those long lenses, you have the tripod shoe, and you can only take a certain part of that off. And so I can't slip the ring beyond that. So I had to have two pieces. I had to have a larger outer ring and two smaller geared rings that then snapped and slid onto it. So they were like half rings that became one.
Yeah.
So it took quite a few iterations and drilling down. But that to me was an extremely important part to nail down, because we can't go up to the gimbal and zoom in and then, the Jaguar's coming closer, zoom out. We can't do that. It's all got to be wireless. So we achieved that goal. We knocked that out. And then the next stage was getting that battery system that I talked about. So I 3D printed a bracket that was like a D-tap splitter. So a D-tap is basically just a way a lot of cinematic components are powered. And we mounted that to the back. And then we had a gold mount battery, which the gold mount and V mount batteries are going to be fairly large, but they can power for a long time. They're what we're using to power these cameras here. And after we had built the rig, it was like, okay, now we got to balance it. And the trick with the Movi is it's got a range of about 12 pounds of carryability until you need to go to the Movi XL, which supports heavy weight. And at the time, the Ronin 2 was not out, which is a DJI gimbal that would have supported far more weight, would have made the job a little bit easier. But we had to, it was a long process of getting it balanced, because it was like, I need to add a little weight here. I added like screws and pieces and parts in different directions to get this crazy rig balanced, because in the final piece, we have a 200 to 600 FX3 gold mount battery, a Terra deck, and we have a focus motor, a zoom motor, and all of the cables going on it. And like you said, it's got to come off the boat at the end of the night. So every morning we would have had to do a recalibration, make sure everything was rebalanced, because just that walk from the boat, to the room, it could bounce and mess something up. So, after we had completed that rig, the most important part was to test it, find all the problems, break it, fix it, get down to the nitty gritty. And so we went to a high HD and rigged up your pickup truck with some speed rail all over it. And I think we did it, I don't know, maybe 2 or 3 times, and brought it back up to the office and got everything hooked up. And we started to quickly figure out what was going to work, what wasn't going to work, and what things we definitely needed backup of. And that's, I'll let you speak to anything before I get further, but I mean, that was kind of the gist of the setup.
Yeah. I think that was a really exciting time for us. I loved every time I would come to the office, you would be fiddling with the system. And as you said, the key component to this is you had to adapt to the equipment that we had. And that means there's a weight threshold for the gimbal. That's something you need to adapt to. The focus rings, you needed to adapt to that in terms of problem solving, and you did. So that was super cool in my opinion. I would see you tinkering every day and taking measurements. I think the coolest part to our pre-production was setting up the Tacoma, my little Tacoma. I call it the Baby Yoda. With the camera rig, we had the bed of the truck with all this rigging and had the camera gimbal dangling from the back end. And then you and I got in the cab, which is only a 2-seater. And yeah, we could control the camera, and then I would drive or you would drive, and we'd see how it would handle the bumps and stuff. And then we had our editor, Ryan, bring his 2 dogs. We took them to a park, and then we like pretended they were jaguars and got a certain distance away. So we were like, all right, let's be 500 meters away or whatever it was, and then test out the focusing and test out just all the features. So to me, that was a really fun time.
Yeah.
Just that time period of just like a little bit of anxiety, the successes when we were like, that worked. And every day you're just getting closer and closer to the trip, a highly anticipated trip. So super fun time for me.
Yeah, it was like preparing a Mars rover to be sent. Like that's the level of detail that we had to put in it. When I see those NASA videos of them in hazmat suits and prepping a rover to go 83 million miles away to a distant planet and be operated, that's how it felt, because without that testing, there would have been things we would have missed, things we would have forgot, and that can't happen when you're there. Because first of all, there is no tech store down there that's going to have, or there's not a tech store down there, period, but there's definitely not going to be a tech store that's got Teradek supplies and Movi supplies and unique cables. So yeah, I think the cool thing about that testing too was, we both kind of honed in the skills a little bit before we got down there. We knew what to expect. We knew how finicky the gimbal would be, the control system. I mean, the Movi was actually being controlled by a PS2 controller. That's what's unique about that gimbal, and even some of the Ronins can still do that.
So briefly describe, we had different roles, right? Once we were on the water, we had 2 roles, right? Focus pulling and then controlling a gimbal. And so just briefly describe that.
Yeah, so with the system we had, it was a 2-man team. I was operating the gimbal via the PS2 controller, and then you were operating focus pulling. And so it's a dance. I mean, it is a tango. We have to communicate. I have to, let's say we want a Jaguar. We determine between both of us what is the distance we want to zoom in, and I get to that zoom, and then we determine what we want to do with that gimbal. So are we behind it and then revealing it? Are we in front of it and letting it walk in? Are we holding on it and tracking it? Are we tracking it and then moving out away from it? So it's important for us in that moment to set what the shot's going to be. And then you can then hold that focus and rack it, change it. Or if it's like we wanted to be on some trees or leaves and then we wanted to reveal the Jaguar in the background, which we did a few times. It's just a dance. Pulls. I mean, it's a back and forth to make sure that we have hit the mark. But back to when we first had gotten the rig set up down there, the excitement was big when we hooked it up and we're like, okay, the stuff that we had pre-pro'd for the boat works. It's all solid. It's locked down. And then we put that rig on, and I mean, I know that you shared the same excitement. It was like, all right, in less than 15 minutes, everything's working. We're up and running. And Fabiano was like, let's take it out for a run. And it was like, yeah, we're here. We're in it.
There was a few, what I call, every time we travel, I have a lot more anxiety than you and Coyote. Yep. Because number one, have to make sure all the gear gets there. So one of the wins was once we arrived in Brazil. Where did we fly into?
Sao Paulo, and then to Piaval.
Yeah, so Sao Paulo. Then we took a flight to
Piaval.
Not Piaval.
Well, it was a town outside of it, but
yeah. Anyways, just arriving at the airport and when we're in baggage claim, every bag that we packed and checked was crucial, especially that arm, which was in its whole system of its own, right? Oh, and actually the Mobi was in the big Pelican.
Yeah, I mean, if any one of those didn't make it, it wasn't happening.
Yeah, so I distinctly remember it's like, we got all the bags, like, cool, that's the first step. Then we had another flight, right? the domestic flight.
Well, but you're missing something though. Remember customs.
Oh, yeah.
So we had done a trip for Animal Planet to Brazil several years ago, and our fixer was like, we need to get a carnet, which a carnet basically says that everything that you took into the country and you're bringing back, you took out with you, so that you're not ditching taxes, like you didn't buy something somewhere and bring it in and try to sell it. And our list was extensive. There was a lot of parts, and it's a lot of money. So you don't want to come into a country with 6 Pelicans of $50,000 worth of gear, and you're going to raise alarms. They're going to be like, Pelicans raise alarms, because you're protecting something valuable. So we get down there, we go through the initial customs, and we're all good, no issues. And I have my carnet, I've got the whole paperwork, everything signed, and I go to like 2 different security guards. I'm like, where do I take the carnet? They're like, go this way. I'm like, okay. And then like we're almost to the exit, and the guy's like, all right, you're just going to go wrap around this way. And we just walked right out. It just took us right out. And I'm like, okay. I was like, well, I guess we just go.
Yeah.
So we left. I don't know if Brazil's going to look for me next time. But
that's true. Like I forgot about that, the carnet. So, these are these little challenges that I don't think most people think about when they think of these productions, but we're dealing with it, right?
Yeah.
It's going through the airport, getting our bags, going through carnet and customs. We finally made it out, and now we have to go to another terminal to catch our next flight. And you probably remember this element of that Sao Paulo airport that we're in. To get to the next terminal, we had to physically get outside, get onto a shuttle bus that looked like a regular bus, right?
Yep.
With all our gear. And the thing is, there was a line for everyone a lot of people were getting on these buses. So every time a bus pulled up, it got full.
And it was chaos.
It was chaos.
And people that had a single backpack or bag would just ditch right in front. And we're like, there's more gear than we can carry. And we can, the carts, like we'd already gotten rid of the carts. So it's like, we're going to need one of the bus drivers or someone to help us out. Like, we can't do this.
We had at least 10 checked bags.
Yeah. I think it was like the 3rd bus before we could even get on.
Yeah. So these are things that you don't anticipate, right? So now we have to move all our gear physically after a long day of travel to finally get to our next terminal. And then we've got to recheck everything.
Yep.
And I remember distinctly, once we rechecked everything, we were just cooked. We went to McDonald's.
The one staple thing that we see all over the world that is exciting are the golden arches. Like when we're off a plane and there's the golden arches, like, yes, I'm McDonald's fries.
Yeah, it's more so like, I don't know, I guess the anxiety of things. I kind of like, all right, let me just get a cheeseburger or something. I don't know.
Yeah. I mean, I always look at like you said, you got a little more anxiety. I mean, for me, it's checkpoints. It's like a video game. It's like, there's a lot of things that are out of our hands. We can have everything in place and some things just might not go our way. I mean, like the carnet situation, I did all of the things right and they didn't check it. So, I mean, it is what it is. I mean, we've run into flight situations where it gets delayed or bags get lost. And so you can prepare as best as possible and then the rest of it's out of your hands.
Right.
And we'll find a solution if something does come up, and we're really good at that.
Yeah. But so I would say luckily everything went smoothly, right?
Yeah,
we got onto the next flight, finally got to the Pantanal with all our bags. That was number one, right? Win. And then, as you said, the final win was putting on the rig on the boat. All the clamps worked. All those little measurements worked. And even Fabiano was super stoked. Yeah. And we're just like, yes, now we could get out on the water.
Yep.
And that was a fantastic feeling after all that travel and all that effort. And then we got on the water and we tested it out. And luckily, in my opinion, we didn't see any jaguars that day, which then kind of built up the anticipation.
Yeah, but we did, I would say, get a really cool series of shots of the jabiru storks. Remember, it was sunset, and it was like, that was a good time for us to test in a real situation, and they weren't moving very much, just kind of slowly walking. So it helped to be not too chaotic. So we got a feel for it.
Yeah, man. No, that was cool. And the whole, I think, in my opinion, the camera system itself, the rig, as we're calling it, became a character in this production.
Yeah.
So I thought it was super cool. Now, in parallel to you rigging everything up and doing all the camera stuff, I was doing research on jaguars. So any trip that we have, I usually compose facts for Coyote to, remember and say during presentations. So number one, Jaguar is one of my favorite species. So I was super stoked to be seeing them, but I was like, I want to know everything I can, right? Just like you were doing all that stuff with the camera. I was like, I need to know everything. So I got this book here, which is, I would say, more like a textbook.
Bible. It's like a Jaguar Bible.
Jaguars of the Northern Pantanal by Paul Brook and Paul Donahue. And this was something that April Kelly had recommended. Now, this, like I said, this is a textbook. It's like close to 300 pages. And this is probably the nerd part of me, but I would, on the weekends, sit down in the morning, read the chapters, and take notes. And that greatly prepared me for the Pantanal in terms of like, which I'll get into, which is the cool part. It helped us become better filmers.
It did, because we understood the behavior better.
Right. So that was the key. I was like, what can I get from this book about Jaguar behavior that's going to help us be better filmers and capture that behavior? So yeah, over the course of a week or so, I read the book and got my notes here. Let me
just imagine if ChatGPT would have been available when we were doing this. You could have said, like, give me an entire summary of this book and that book in a concise document here. And AI.
Yeah, I mean, that's a good point, but
it's cool to have read it.
I
and
love,
like you went through it. I mean, you probably gained more knowledge by doing that rather than a summary.
Here's something maybe controversial that I might say, but I think it's true. We live in a time where information is at our fingertips. Fast information is fast to forget.
Mm-hmm. Short term.
Slow information that you gain over time sinks in more. That's my philosophy.
Yeah, I mean, we had talked about that before. I mean, things come in and go out very quickly into the modern day. Yeah.
But for me, reading and then writing it, that's now more embedded in my brain.
Yeah.
That's how I work. Anyways, I took all these. I mean, I was just like a nerd. I was just geeking out. I was like, cool.
You are a nerd.
Yeah. What's the coolest facts I could put here?
Yeah.
Let me just read a few of these. Here's one. It has been hypothesized that jaguars have adapted to be reptile hunters because of their unusual jaw structure. Kind of cool.
Yeah.
Jaguars have thick canines, excessively strong jaw muscles, and the perfect position of teeth for creating a fatal bite, allowing jaguars to dispatch prey like caiman quickly with minimum damage to themselves. That's super cool to me.
Yeah.
Essentially, here's the things that I learned from this without looking at my notes and cheating. The jaguars of the Pantanal are the largest jaguars in the world, right? Jaguars range from parts of the US. They sometimes get into like Arizona, parts of Texas, but primarily Mexico, through Central America, through South America. The jaguars in the Pantanal, based on this book, are 90 to 100% bigger than the jaguars in Mexico. And then they're significantly big, 50, 60% plus bigger than the jaguars in Costa Rica, for example. So to put that in perspective, a male jaguar in the Pantanal, northern Pantanal, could be 220 pounds, 250 pounds, which is big.
And we saw 2 or 3 of them that were that big, if not more.
And what's cool is they compared the male jaguars of the northern Pantanal to female lioness in Africa. The lions are pretty big. But I mean, I remember coming into the office during the pre-production. We'd talk, we'd be hanging out at our gear area. You'd be fiddling, I'd be telling you these cool little facts. And we would just be getting like stoked for the trip. And yeah, I just thought I reminisce, and that was just a cool time frame for us.
Yeah, and I think that the experience that we gained from the level of pre-production and tools and reading up on the wildlife aided us in our Alaska trip years later, recently, because it was like now we know what stuff to really look for and how to really pre-pro for a very elaborate, complex trip. So this trip kind of set the stage for a lot of stuff that we've done in the last couple of years since this one.
For sure. So some of the key little tidbits that I took away from the book that we were using for filming, I don't know if you remember any of them. Let me first say, for those wondering, jaguars in the Pantanal are so big, because that's a question I had. Why are they so big? Because availability of prey sources. They have bigger prey sources, and particularly caiman. These jaguars there are caiman specialists. And during the dry season and other parts of their range, that might be a detriment to jaguars. But in the Pantanal, that's when they're thriving.
And there's a lot of caiman. I mean, they were everywhere.
Yeah.
I mean, in the mid-afternoon, there were just hundreds of them basking everywhere, targets.
And these are particularly, the species is the Yacaré caiman, which is the one primarily found in that region. So back to my question. Do you remember any of those tidbits I had given you that would help us anticipate if the jaguar was going to do anything?
Yes, yawning.
Okay.
So yawning means that they're likely about to move. So when there was quite a few jaguars that just sit there and lay around, and we would wait for that big yawn, and we're like, camera on, gimbal on, let's lock off, because they're probably going to do something.
Yeah.
They're either going to walk, they're going to hunt, or they're going to get some water. And if there's a cub or another one nearby, they might go play. And every single time it was pretty much dead on. That's exactly what happened, one of those things.
You would think a yawn just means like, I'm going to go to sleep. But the author, one of the authors particularly said that yawning is a way for actually an animal to get more oxygen in. You stretch your muscles. And the author in this said, most of the time when a jaguar is doing nothing, hanging out, it yawns, it likely will be getting up shortly after that. So we had a little bit of an advantage once we saw that. Yeah. Some other tidbits. One, if we came up to a jaguar, a female with cubs, stay on that female, because if they have cubs, they have more mouths to feed, right? So a female jaguar is going to do more hunting than a male because of that aspect. So obviously, if we saw a female with cubs, we would want to stay there. Here's a tidbit that's kind of obvious. If you see a jaguar and it's lying down and it's got a big stomach, bloated stomach, what does that mean?
It's full.
It's full.
Relaxing.
Just ate something.
Yeah.
So likely that jaguar is not going anywhere for a long time. And then finally, if you encounter a jaguar that is sitting or in a position that has a good vantage point of the water, and there are caiman around, you stay there too. Because at that point, that jaguar likely knows exactly where those caiman are at and is probably waiting for the opportunity to pounce on it. Because I should say this, the goal of the entire trip was to capture hunting behavior, right? Mm-hmm. Only place in the world where you've got these big jaguars hunting other apex predators. Our goal was to film a hunting event. So anything that would increase our chances of filming that, we're going to do.
Yeah, and it was a daily task. I mean, I guess I'll go into a little bit about what that process with the boats and stuff is.
We're there.
Yeah.
We've got all our equipment. The boat works. The cameras work. What was a typical day?
A typical day, yeah, which we did in pre-production. I remember I was like, I want to know, Fabiano, what is it going to look like from sun up to sundown? What is the process? And he did a very good job. It was exactly as he said. You have to get up very early. You want to get up before the sun rises. You want to be on the water basically while the sun is starting to crest. So we're getting up, I think I was waking up at 4:30, so that, because remember, the gimbal needed to be calibrated and adjusted, check all the batteries, reload the Pelican, and then just get it out to the boat, get it hooked up, and then there's another check on the boat to make sure that everything's working. And then once everything's good, we make sure that everyone's got their stuff, their lunch, their food, we're out. And we jet out to the middle of the kind of central area where it's really low, the water's low, and a lot of caiman. And there's maybe 30 boats, like at the peak hour afternoon, there's maybe 30 boats on the water. So the process is you have all these guys with interconnected radios, and everyone's looking in different areas on the river to try to find any jaguar. It doesn't matter which one. If there is a jaguar, they'll call it out, and everybody rushes over there. So it might be 5:30, it might be 6, it might be 7. The first jaguar is spotted. I remember on the first day, it was fairly early. The sun had just crested, and we get the call. And we had seen a few other boats, but we weren't ready quite for what we were about to experience. And I mean, it was like flies on poo, basically. It was like the boats are ripping through. You would have thought it was a speedboat competition.
Yeah.
Like Fabiano was whipping that thing like it was an airboat in the Everglades. And yeah, we fly up onto the Jaguar, and it was just up on a hill, and we're all like, oh, get the gimbal going. Oh, we got to start building. Like, we're just like freaking out, like, oh, there it is. And yeah, I mean, I would say there was probably 10 boats on that, and they're filled with tourists, they're filled with photographers, and you know, everyone there spent quite a bit of money to get there, and a lot of them are photographers, so they want to capture a moment as well. So in that very first moment, we realized, okay, there's going to be a significant challenge making sure that we can get into position, because we had the gimbal was ever so slightly raised off the top of the boat, and you understand why BBC had a crane, so that they could reach out over other boats or get in a unique way. So that was kind of like the start of a day. I know you want to say something.
Yeah,
get in there, bro.
Yeah, no, like you said, we quickly realized like there's other boats getting in our way, like literally right in front of the camera.
Like no regard.
And what you never will see in a BBC documentary is the chaos of it all. And this is a little bit of a controversial aspect of things, right? The Porte de Joffre area, which is the area that we were at, has become renowned for the jaguars, how easy it is to see them and potentially get these behavior shots. So of course, it becomes a tourist attraction. There's good and bad of that. And I know that we, especially at the end of our trip, we had definitely our opinions on this. And the point is ecotourism. When does it become bad, right? And what are the benefits too? And obviously in this really small community, it has become a huge benefit. This is now an economy of itself, right? Money is coming into this small town. Tour guides are getting money. The jaguars are now being celebrated, right? You're not going to kill or poach something that is bringing in revenue. So in a sense, the tourism is helping to protect jaguars in this area. However, are there negative repercussions from this? I mean, what did you see that potentially is negative? Because I certainly did see some things.
Yeah, I mean, I do have an opinion on all of it, especially since I just watched a documentary on pangolins. So what we found is some of the guys that were boat drivers were former poachers, and they were educated and realized like, hey, this is not what we should be doing. And right now there's more money to be made on the tourism side of taking people out on a boat, driving around, showing them the jaguars. But the more boats you have, the more chaos you have, the more noise you have, you're disturbing the waters. There were many times where we're in a very narrow canal with a jaguar or two, and they're hunting for a caiman, and the water's sloshing, the caiman are getting jarred and shoot everywhere because of the boats. So as the volume of boats increases, like Porte de Joffre is not going to go backwards in tourism. There's only going to be more because it's all over social media. More and more people want to go, and I don't want to rob anyone of their right to go see this. But the more that happens there, the more problems are going to be. Now, right now, there is a lot of prey for them.
Yeah.
And we saw that there's a lot of animals, but will the increase in boats create less prey? Will it push caiman to not be in the area because they start to become aware of like we don't want to be near the boats, therefore making the jaguars struggle more and become less?
Yeah,
these are things to think about.
Yeah, it's tough. There's certainly a carrying capacity for that area, I think, especially in years where the water level is very, very low. Certain channels can only support certain boats going through, a certain number of boats. So it's interesting. Once again, a topic that you could apply to many parts of the world, the Serengeti. You know, I've never seen the wildebeest migrations, but I've seen pictures of how many. There's a whole mass of cars that are just as plentiful as the wildebeest, waiting to see those wildebeest cross, the rivers and doing the migration. So pros and cons. I think right now the pros definitely outweigh the cons because they're keeping jaguars alive. And secondly, the jaguars and animals in this area have become habituated to the boats, just like a safari vehicle does not pose a threat to a lion or a leopard or a cheetah. The jaguars here, which is the most unique part, is they don't see the boats as a threat, which is great. That's why we could get up to them. Now, I would say there's also, based on the book that I read, the jaguars take advantage of the boats too.
They do.
Right?
Yeah.
The jaguars take advantage of the noise of the boats in order to sneak up on the caiman. The jaguars take advantage of the wake of the boat, right? The wake coming up and washing up a jaguar or washing up a caiman, or potentially like concealing that caiman for a second so that jaguar could pounce on it. There's a very famous video out there of exactly that, a jaguar that seems to be using the boats as a distraction for the caiman to sneak up behind it and grab the caiman. So pros and cons, I would say. And at this point in time, we'll see, we don't know yet what the outcomes could be.
I think, I don't know since we've been there if there's some more regulations or whatnot, but having some sort of time windows that boats can be on there and the volume of boats that can be on there, because I think when we were there, pretty much anybody could be out there. I don't know if there was permits or licenses that you had to be on the water. I'll have to look that up. I can't say for sure, but having a limit to be like, okay, well, there can only be 10 boats per this time. So like this tour company can operate for this many hours, and then they're off, and then another one's on, or on and off days, because it might not be a problem now, but this is what happens with wildlife. It's always not a problem now, and then it becomes a problem. The Vice documentary I just watched the other day about pangolins and seeing where they're taking the scales from in Africa and the people that are taking them, and they interviewed a couple of these people with hidden. They interviewed a couple of these people with hidden masks and stuff, and they're like, "We got to pay for our families. We got to we got to raise our kids. We got to be able to have food on the table." And this is the same thing in Africa with rhinos. Like we're seeing this all over the world, and so.
Which then comes to ecotourism, because ecotourism has been proven in many parts of the world that now that's combating poaching, right? Mm-hmm. Those poachers now could get a job actually tracking an animal for tourists so they could get photos instead of shooting it. So, pros and cons to it. The situation there in Pointe Joffre is very unique. So, of course, there's pros and cons with the tourism. I would say one of the pros that Abby from the Jaguar ID project is taking advantage of is, well, a lot of people out on the river, right? You've got these tour guides that are, most of them professional, that have all these guests from around the world that are seeking jaguars. So why don't we use citizen science and have people help to ID jaguars, help to send information and pictures to Abby to keep track of where individual jaguars are. Now, I think it's self-explanatory, Jaguar Identification Guide, meaning we're going to give it a name. We're going to give these jaguars a name to help the tourists, ID them. And every season, Abby creates this little pamphlet here. That's the guide. This is the 2022 season. It's pretty genius and pretty simple. Inside, you have all the male jaguars and their names, and all the female jaguars and their names. And you have the first time that jaguar was seen and named. You have when was certain features of the jaguar, which is the most important part, right? So let's backtrack. How do you identify a jaguar?
Spots.
The spots.
Yeah, they're unique. It's like freckles on a human, or moles. They're not the same. On each jaguar.
Pretty straightforward, kind of, right?
Some can be complex, but some are just absolutely notifiable immediately.
Yeah. So once you look at a picture of a jaguar, and Abby has the pictures, nicely positioned, and she will highlight any of the features, you will quickly go through the book and be like, I see that little feature there that if I see that jaguar in the wild, that will tell me it's this animal. And so Abby uses the tourists to essentially help to determine these animals' whereabouts. Maybe you're not seeing a certain individual for a season. They will mark that in here. And it became really cool because as a biologist, I was always focused on trying to identify the jaguars. And there was a few that stood out, right? In particular, Patricia. She was the star of our episode because, as we will reveal in a few minutes, she's the one that we followed the most. But do you remember, without looking at this, what was Patricia's most famous marking?
I think she had like on her face on the side. It was like it was a kind of a couple spots combined, right? Like a line almost.
Yeah. So Patricia is the logo of the ID project. She had on her, let's find Patricia. She had like an L-shaped marking on her,
right
on her right side.
Like right here.
Yeah. I mean, here, you could take a look at it to remember, but very distinct, like L-shaped marking by her, on her right side of the face, by her eye. And also her nose was very distinct in coloration. That's something that I would notice. And so anyways, every morning, 5 a.m., we'd go out. We'd have April on the boat, Fabiano, Valdo, Coyote, you and I. Eventually, Abby joined us, and we started to film her explaining about the ID project and her work. And Abby and April, we'd come up to a jaguar, and in 2 seconds, they'd be like, oh, that's Madrosa. Or, oh, that's Bay.
Yeah.
Or Axa. Or Juru.
Yeah.
They had it down packed.
Yeah.
They would look at the jaguars the way that you would look at your dog and be like, that's Kumo, or that's Gigi.
Yep.
You know, in a sea of other dogs, even the same breed, you could identify your dog.
Which, you know what? We should bring them on a studio session sometime.
Oh, you think so?
Gigi and Kumo. Yeah, because I don't think anybody would ever expect that those are the dogs that we would have.
Yeah. They could have their own little podcast.
Yeah, yeah.
Gigi would be all emo and Kumo would be all hyper and
Yeah.
stuff. So yeah, back to just getting on the water, our routines. I could say this, I greatly enjoyed our routine. Every morning, get up, I would not feel tired because I would be so motivated, get a quick breakfast, we're out on the water. You never knew what was going to happen that day. And the thing is, every day we saw jaguars.
Every day. And after we realized that even further enhanced the excitement because it was like, we're gonna see something. You know, a lot of times when we go out herping, it's like we may not see anything. May see one thing, I don't know. But with the jaguars, you're right. It was, what was the total? Like 36 sightings with like what 10 to 15 different individuals,
something like that.
It was ridiculous. Yeah. It was like we were starting to then see groups of them, and it was.
Yeah.
It was,
well, let's. Why don't we discuss some of these moments that I quickly jotted down. You mentioned the very first jaguar we saw, right? Which was sleeping, of course. First jaguar sleeping, not in a position that seemed like it was going to wake up anytime soon. It was just coiled. Mm-hmm. And then we got bombarded by boats. So we left that.
But it did move. Remember, it did. We tracked it through the
That's
trees
right.
a little bit, but then it kind of disappeared into the. But
That's
it was a nice, exciting test and realization of what was going to be on the water.
Yeah. I would say another little highlight was, remember when we came upon that male and the female, which I think the female was Patricia. And the male did that Fleming response. Mm-hmm. So a Fleming response is something that a lot of mammals, particular cats, do. And that is they kind of curl up their lips. It looks like they're growling or they're baring their teeth. They look super derpy. For sure. They look derpy. But what they're doing is they're inhaling and they're passing the air through the Jacobson's organ on the roof of their mouth, and they're sensing like pheromones. So it's a way to sense the environment. This male was doing that because Patricia, the female, was nearby. So he was doing that Fleming response, taking in her
He was getting
scent.
turned on, basically.
It was, because they did mate a little bit.
They did. And we were trying to capture that, but they were stuck behind the grass. Like, let's get the water drinking, the mating, let's get it all.
Yeah. I remember that scene, the Fleming response. I remember then Patricia drinking water because we got a badass shot of that.
Yeah, that was sick.
Right.
And there was a couple seconds where she looked right down the barrel of the lens, and it was just like in slow-mo.
Yeah, because we were filming this all in 120, right?
We were, yeah.
Primarily.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that also was a lot of footage that we were getting.
A lot of footage. I mean, but thankfully with the FX3, we had that H.265. So imagine we would have had a Red or an Airy or something out there. We would have just been packing up SSDs, just bang, bang, bang.
Yeah. So I distinctly remember that scene. I'm trying to get back to the Fleming response thing. I want to make sure I give the proper definition of that.
I think that was right.
I
think, yeah.
I know I'm right, but I just want to see if I could do better. Let's see. Drinking the water.
Female.
Jaguar.
Well, I guess I can talk about
What's the next one?
The female and the cubs playing. So
we're talking about
this. Is that the one where they were like, we first saw them on that sandy shore?
Yes.
Yeah.
But we couldn't film them. So briefly explain that one.
Yeah, this was our first encounter with the cubs. There was kind of a beach and like an embankment, and they were far back, and it was kind of in a U shape, and there were some boats on the far side. We were on the other one, and they were going to come towards us. So the boats were kind of moving our way. And they started walking towards us, and we were hoping that they were going to come right down the beach. It would have been all three of them, like boom, boom, boom. Right down
man,
there.
we were ready.
We were ready. We're like, we are in position. Fabian or Valdo, who by the way was an insanely awesome boat driver, who anticipated everything, knew the Jaguars like the back of his hand, and always had us in the right position. We didn't even have to say anything. He knew. He was looking at the gimbal, looking at us, and we never had to say anything.
Yeah, shout out to Valdo for sure.
Yeah. So, we were in position for that, and we got a little bit of the action, but they were pretty far away. We probably would have needed like 1,000 mil to get them, but they didn't fully come our way, but it was our first encounter of seeing two cubs with the mom.
Yeah, but do you remember we had our gimbal was too low?
Yeah. Yeah, we had to make that adjustment. We were very quick. We like put our stuff down, ran up, unlatched it, raised it really high. And I think at one point, Coyote 2 just held it up.
Fabiano was trying to hold it. But we were like, I don't know if you should do that because we don't know if it's going to create vibrations. I remember that was just a bit of a frustrating moment. But we got to see a female with cubs, bigger cubs, by the way. They were a little bigger.
And I want to say that was the second day. So we were pretty early on. But we were still like antsy. Like every Jaguar we were seeing, we were on high alert.
Yeah. I did find the definition. It's pretty much what I said, but I'll just read it straight up. During a Fleming response or reaction, a jaguar would use its Jacobson's organ to process the scent passing through its nasal passages. So exactly what I said. Yeah, well. If you have a cat, a domestic cat, you've seen it do the Fleming response. All right, moving on. We've got this one was a cool moment. Okay, we were down this. What did they call it? The little canals, Corijos. Yeah. We were down at Corijo, and we saw a caiman that had a messed up jaw. Remember that? It
was like all hanging off to the side.
Gnarly. Clearly a predation event. I'm not clearly. It could have been another caiman attack when it was younger or something, but it was a healed up wound. But its whole bottom jaw, like one part of it, was just hanging. Yeah,
it almost looked as if a jaguar had jumped and like meant to grab its top of its skull and got its, and it probably death rolled and like split it and ripped it. Yeah.
We were observing this jaguar, or we were observing this caiman. We're the only ones in this area, and all of a sudden behind us we just hear a big splashing.
Yeah.
We all turn around, and what was it?
It was a jaguar.
It's a freaking jaguar that tried to catch a caiman and missed.
Yep. And we were like, and trying to flip the gimbal around super fast, but it took off. Yeah,
we couldn't. Yeah. If I remember correctly, I think that was Margot or Madrosa, because eventually she went onto a tree. I think she was frustrated. She went up the tree and she hung out and like just rested a little bit.
We got very close in that scenario.
Yeah, so that was just like, dude, there's jaguars everywhere.
Caiman and jaguars everywhere.
Okay, next one. 3. Oh yeah, remember when it was one morning we came upon a female and like 3 cubs, fairly big cubs, just beautifully lying down out in the open. Mm-hmm. I remember distinctly seeing that moment, and we had them in frame. I was just like, I went from never seeing a jaguar, right, to now like, here's just 3 of them hanging out.
And I think we stopped to eat lunch in front of them, right?
Yeah.
We were eating lunch while they were taking
That's
a nap.
right. Yeah, we were just like, cool, let's just eat lunch and hang out a little bit, see if they're going to do something. The next moment was the 2 large male jaguars. Remember that?
Yeah, which was like some of my favorite shots because we were low, I would say probably 8 feet below them shooting upwards, and they were the big males, so it just felt way more dominant at that angle. You couldn't have asked for a more epic shot as they were walking along that ridge.
They were just parallel to us.
Yeah.
Almost, actually, almost eye level to us.
Yeah.
Or meaning like they could just like bloop,
Yep.
jump on the boat.
Yep. And they did do that nice little stop on the corner, and we got that cool like wraparound reveal.
Yeah.
We followed them for a little while, actually.
Yeah. Another interesting fact about jaguars in the Pantanal is that it's one of the few areas where jaguars have been observed having coalitions. That's what they call it, a coalition of males hanging out together to increase their odds of hunting and catching prey. This is something that you see a lot in like African cats, big cats, but there's so much food that they could afford to just like create little packs, which is super cool. And they call them coalitions there. So this was a coalition of male jaguars.
I think one of my favorite things that I saw across those days with all these jaguars is their intelligence. And you realize like dogs are amazing. Dogs are great. They're smart, but cats are on a different level. Hunters. Like, and that takes brains. I mean, like you were saying, a coalition. Like, do dogs go in a coalition? No, I don't know. Not like cats.
Well, wolf packs.
Wolf packs, but I would consider them a little different than the domesticated dogs that we are all familiar
Trent,
with.
are you opening up the world of who's better, dogs or cats? Because Suzanne over there, she's a cat lady.
She's a cat lady. I'm
dog.
I'm a dog
guy.
But yeah, it's evident.
Yeah.
Which is better at survivability per se.
I love dogs, but I will always say this: dogs are completely domesticated. They rely on us. Domesticated cats still have that wild side. Cats in general are better equipped hunters, big cats, domesticated cats, than canids. Sorry, dog people are going to hate me for that.
That's the truth. I mean, how many times if you have a cat at home, how many times has it brought back a bird or a rodent and set it in front of you?
Yeah.
Kumo's never done that to me. He's never brought any dead animal back.
But dogs, they will love you unconditionally.
Unconditionally.
Cats, they could be like, today I don't like you.
And who did Jane Goodall say her favorite animal was?
Jane Goodall, the primatologist who studies chimpanzees. Her favorite animal is the dog.
The domesticated dog.
There you go. So, side tangent. So, the male jaguars were sick, man. They were. I remember posting on Instagram a clip of that, and I put a Tool song on there. Like, I think the Tool song was Zombie, and it's just like, and they're just walking in slow motion.
Yeah,
Sick.
that was epic.
All right. Next moment.
Dun, 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 dun.
The old
female.
The old female. What was her name?
Started with an M, wasn't it?
Esperanza? No, what was
It
her
wasn't
name?
Madrosa.
No. Let me see if I can find her. Set the stage, Trent. We come upon what?
We come upon a jaguar. Nothing unsuspecting. It's doing what a lot of them were, laying down up under the trees on a ridge. And it was evening. I think it was close to sunset, maybe an hour till. And Valdo put us in a nice position, and they identified it as being the oldest recorded jaguar in the area.
Yeah.
I want to say it was like 16 years, something like that. It was quite a while.
She was a queen of the river.
Yep, and you could tell like she looked older. She looked a little worn in the face, just like a human would.
Yeah.
And it wasn't doing anything. And
A few key things. We were the only ones
in that spot. Only ones in that spot. And Coyote wanted to get some more drone shots, even though we had all the drone shots covered. I was like, the Pantanal has been filmed. We do not need any more drone shots. We're on this Jaguar. And we looked at Valdo, and we're like, Valdo, should we leave this Jaguar? And he goes, no. He didn't speak in English. He very clearly was like,
Yeah.
I would stay. He's like, I would stay. She's going to do something. Because remember, these people are on the water every day. They know all of these jaguars like the back of their hands. So I'm going to trust whatever they're saying. But guys, let's get some drone shots. I'm like, all right. So we went around the corner, popped the drone up to do some drone shots, flying around, got a couple more. I'm bringing it back down, and then another boat is coming over.
No. So we went rounded the bend.
Around the corner to fly the drone.
Yeah, fly the drones. You're not allowed to fly the drones next to the Jaguars.
Yes. So we went we went around like this big U shape. So we couldn't even see it anymore.
Yeah.
Like we were like well beyond it.
We did have permission to film the environment, but you cannot chase Jaguars. So yeah.
Yeah.
We brought them down, and then we started to drive.
No. We had already brought it down, and we were like getting ready to just maybe go back, or like we were just kind of done.
Yeah.
Because the sun was starting to come down, and then another boat came, and there was a couple behind it, and they're like, "Oh my gosh, guys, you missed it! It was so crazy. She jumped in the water and she got a caiman." And me and you were just through the roof, and we were both like, "Let's go!" And Lovato whipped it around. We were powering up the gimbal because we would power it down in between the drives. And as we are pulling up, like the gimbal's spinning around, there she is dragging this fairly large caiman up the embankment and down the other side. And I'll let you talk about the aftermath of that.
Let me give a moment to
a moment of silence.
People
let's take a
watching
moment of
this, my frustrations. I'm rubbing my head here in frustration.
So we came for the kill, and this was our last day. And we missed the kill.
Okay, so this was day 6.
Yeah, but
of 7.
Yeah. But we were packing up the last day, so I think it was our last day on the water.
No, it wasn't our last day. This was day 5 of 7.
Okay. Yeah, okay.
Day 5 of 7. Our whole goal for this trip was to catch behavior shots of a jaguar catching a caiman. We've prepared a lot for this. We've put a lot of resources into this. So that moment to me was devastating. I could honestly say that you were there, and I had some key words.
It's very choice
words that I said. I remember distinctly saying to Valdo, let's go back to the lodge. We're done for the day. We're amateurs. And that's what we did. We went back to the lodge, and we were shaking our heads. And I think the one thing Valdo said was, or I think April or Abby said was like, always listen to Valdo.
Yeah. He was right. He said that she was going to move. She did.
Yeah.
She got it.
Frustrating. It was a frustrating moment that I could count as probably my least favorite moment of the trip. So what did we do? Well, we went back, frustrated, ate dinner, and then the next day we went back out on the river because now we have 2 days left. And what's the lesson learned? The lesson learned is always follow your guide's advice. 2, patience is key. And 3, if you don't have patience, don't be on the boat. Don't be there.
Yeah.
Not calling out anything, but that there's often a lot of failures when we're out filming. Let's face it. Sometimes it's situational stuff that happens and it's no one's control.
Well, weather and wildlife are unpredictable.
Yeah.
Hand in hand.
Sometimes we all make decisions that are not the right decision. So I'm not calling any one person out, but that's just the case. Sometimes we all make that decision that wasn't the best for that moment. But that hurt me a lot.
Yeah. I mean, trust me, because I think we kind of skipped over our hunt with Patricia, but that happened before this.
No. Patricia's after.
Was it after?
Yep.
Okay. Yeah, I was 100% sure.
So
That's right. Yeah. Because of the last day. Yeah.
So day 2 comes around and we're like, cool. We don't have much time. Let's do it. And there comes Patricia. But Patricia,
who we had already seen earlier in the week.
We've already seen her. Well, we wake up the next day, we get out on the river, and we see Patricia. And she was hungry. It was very clear that she was in a hunting mode. And several things occurred within those last 2 days. But that first day that we see Patricia, she's clearly hunting along the banks, moving, looking at the water, looking at the reeds, looking for caiman. there was a super cool moment where we're in a position where we're kind of out in the open, and Valdo saw her like go into vegetation, and he anticipated this. He goes all the way around to the other side. We see a capybara. We see two capybaras. We see caiman, and he literally positions us and says, she's going to come out right there.
Well, but right before that, though, the way she got over there is she swam across. Remember, he anticipated that.
She swam across.
She was over here off to our right, and she was coming down in the vegetation, and he stopped and was like, he anticipated she's going to cross, and like they will wait for the boat. They know that they don't want to get in the way, so there was maybe one other boat somewhere else, and so we both stopped, and then she crossed the water, which was another behavior we hadn't seen yet.
Yeah,
swam across, and then we got her, see her jump up over the cliff, or the hillside, and then that's when she started going over, and that's when he was like, all right, now we can go.
Yeah,
and then set up that window.
Set up the scene, man. Yeah, jaguars are like semi-aquatic. Mm-hmm. Bottom line, you could say they're semi-aquatic. They're just as home in the water than on land.
Which is crazy because like cats, your domesticated cats, absolutely hate the water.
Right.
So you're like, what, a cat in the water? Yeah.
That's what makes these guys even more cool, in my opinion. So he sets up the scene. We're there, and sure enough, Patricia just pops out of the vegetation, and I remember she's slowly walking, and then, boop, the capybara spotted her, and they just take off.
Making a crazy noise too, or jumping in the water.
As they take off, she's running. There's still a caiman, and then she runs to the edge, but unfortunately the caiman and capybara left. But it was our first like predation moment, like high speed action moment that we saw.
Yep. And we were following her for an hour. Remember, because we had to do a card swap before we got to that other side.
Right.
And she was still actively hunting, and we were like, we've burned through both cards. We got to swap real quick. And it was like a pit crew. Like within less than 20 seconds, card swap, cameras back on, gimbals powered, and we're back locked on her.
Yeah.
So yeah, that was a moment that came once.
Yeah. And then
we didn't see that again.
The next hours of that day, and then following it the next day, Patricia was still hunting. She did not make a successful kill. We have fantastic footage of her literally in the water, like she was a caiman or a crocodile, right? Just her head above the surface, swimming along the reeds and vegetation up to caiman. So that's what's really cool. Like jaguars here will even hunt in the water swimming caiman. So we had probably 2 or 3 moments where she's sneaking up on a caiman, and my heart was pounding when I was filming this. And then she just lunges forward, goes underwater, but then comes up empty-handed. Mm-hmm. And
that second one, she almost didn't even, like, she almost just bumped into it.
Yeah.
Like, remember, it was like, because it was kind of tucked, and she was just like, doot, and just kind of bumped it, and then
tried to get it. Yeah. Amazing stuff. So we got her attempting to catch a caiman, but she did not. But
somebody did.
Our trip ended. Yeah. And then what happened the next day?
The next day, I think we had either gotten back, we're on the plane, and our buddy Marlon, who is a tour guide in South Africa and an amazing photographer, is in the Pantanal. Like, he just had gotten there.
Yep.
I think maybe a day before we did, and it was beginning his journey, and he got it. He got the kill.
Patricia, literally almost the same frames as our failed attempts, catching a big caiman.
Yep. And he was able to get, he was using a Sony handheld and was able to get a few seconds of that. And we reached out to see if we could use that shot to kind of end our story, giving him credit in the episode, because we had this epic story and we didn't want to end it with like no kill or no final piece. And we didn't want to have to like piece something together from another Jaguar. It was Patricia got the kill. So It was a great bookend. I would have preferred for us to have that bookend. But
that's wildlife.
But that goes back to the 1 week. We had chosen the earlier part of July because of some other productions and some conflicting things.
Well, also, too, Valdo or Fabiano said that July would be a little less boats on the water.
A little less boats, yeah. But had we done 2 weeks, we would have cleaned up, because all the people that we had made friends with, boat drivers, guides, we had started following them while we were there. That whole week after, it was like bang, 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 kills, 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 because the water level had gotten even lower, and the desperation to eat got higher, and it was primo. So
yeah, I mean, I remember Fabiano said minimum he would always recommend at least like 13 to 14 days minimum. You know, so you know, once again, every situation is different. Our budget did not allow for 2 weeks. You know. But it certainly hurt every time we would get onto Instagram and be like, oh man, look at that epic shot.
Yeah.
Right in the spot that we were at. So moral of the story is, we don't always get the shots, but we made the episode. It still was a fantastic episode. It shows the struggles of filming and the struggles of animals. I mean, they're not perfect, right? Patricia was really hungry for 2 days, probably more, right? Before she finally got her kill. So that's a testament to how tough it is even for a jaguar in this area of plenty, you know? Yeah, came back from that trip, and all I remember is that you and I were like, when are we going back?
Yeah, we gotta get a redemption chance.
Yeah, so who knows? One day we might go back to the Pantanal. I know this. Fabiano, future Global Guardians guest.
Definitely.
Abby, definitely a future Global Guardians guest, and of course April Kelly. So maybe we could do them all at the in the Pantanal. That'd be a fantastic interview location.
I agree. And you know, one thing we forgot to mention that came out of our work that we did there was about a year ago, maybe a year and a half ago, a French DP, Emmanuel, had reached out to me and said, hey, I saw your guys' video on the Jaguars in Pantanal, and we're actually doing a documentary on Abby, like similar to what we did on YouTube, but like they're doing it properly just on her, and not showcasing the boats or anything, just like a proper documentary. And he said, we want to use kind of the same setup you did, same similar camera and build. And he's like, can you point us in the right direction? So we had a couple Zoom calls with him, and you know, I kind of gave him the rundown of what we used, what worked, what didn't work. And, you know, he was sending me test photos back and forth. They were actually using a DJI Ronin 2, which would have been amazing to have on this shoot. And they had one operator actually, because the Ronin has a wireless wheel system and I think like a wireless, like you can move the handles around and it will move in response to that. So you can pull focus and move handles at the same time. But when he sent me the photos, they did the same thing, center pole straps, gimbal system, and it worked for them. So I need to watch that documentary. I haven't seen it yet. It just came out. But
that's pretty cool.
But cool to see that like the work we did on the tech side and even working with Abby was
influenced.
Showcased. Yeah,
it influenced another team, because I think one thing we didn't just quickly bring up, our boat became like the boat of the river.
Yeah.
Everyone would geek out over our rig, right? Our rig was pronounced, and it was very innovative. Fabiano loved it. Everyone that saw it loved it, and they would take inspiration to be like, we got to do this for our next time we're out there. So yeah, that's a credit to you and all the work you did for the rig. Well, extensive. I think we've been talking for a while.
Yeah, we've covered. I feel like we've covered all the topics that we wanted to in regards to this trip and everything that we learned and the build up to it. So.
Yeah, despite it was 2022 when we did this trip. It's still fresh in my mind and one of my favorite trips so far. All right, we're gonna do these quick takes, which are just quick questions.
Speed round.
Yeah. Trent's take. Starting off, favorite Jaguar.
Favorite Jaguar would have to be the male or males. That shot was epic. That moment was epic, seeing them kind of towering over us. So as far as a moment, I liked that moment.
Okay. Yeah. Most rewarding moment.
Patricia going for the capybara and the caiman, because it was a behavioral moment. She might have not gotten the kill, but to see a jaguar actively hunting two different species in one moment was insanely epic.
Yeah, super cool. Most frustrating moment.
Missing the kill.
Yeah, I mean, that's a given.
That was yeah.
Okay. Food and accommodations rating. Rating system of 1 through 5.
1 through 5. For the area and for Brazil, I would give it a 4. I mean, it was the Pantera Lodge. Food was great. It was served like we had. We didn't have to go cook anything ourselves. The rooms had AC. Most importantly, showers were warm. bathrooms
complain.
could flush. Toilets, we've been in worse places. Palo Verde, Costa Rica. Yeah, so I mean, it was great. It had AC. I mean, when you're in a hot place, AC is really all that matters.
All right, I'll give you my quick takes.
All right. Favorite Jaguar?
Patricia, for sure.
Yep.
She's the queen of the river.
Queen. Most rewarding moment?
Most rewarding moment. Seeing Patricia hunting was fantastic, but I'm trying to think of another
Something
moment.
different,
Yeah. Most rewarding moment.
It's okay if it's the same. I mean,
You want to know what the most rewarding moment was? The camera was working. Us getting out on the river.
That is a rewarding moment. Yeah.
And being like, these things work. And I think that was the biggest win. One of the biggest wins for sure.
Yeah, we wouldn't have been able to do the trip without it.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what it comes down to. Most frustrating moment, I think that's going to be I wonder what that one was.
I don't know. Certainly missing the kill. Okay.
Missing the kill, and then the food and accommodations. Where would you put it? You've been in some rough places more than I have, as a biologist. So
food, I give it a 5 for food.
Yeah, food was
delicious. I love the Portuguese culture, the Brazilian culture. Everyone's super friendly. So a 5 on that. And accommodations, a 5 as well, because we had AC and we had hot water and we had a bed.
Yep. And when you come home from a day on the river and you're not really like sweaty or scummy because you've been in a boat all day, but like you're tired of being in this position. You just want to stretch out, have a nice bed and nice AC, and it had both of those. So.
Yeah, not going to complain. All right, that's Brazil. If you've never seen the episode that we're talking about, it is on our Brave Wilderness YouTube channel, so we'll put a link in the description below. Definitely check it out. And what do you think? Brazil Part 2, Pantanal Part 2?
It's coming. We're definitely going to make a comeback. I got a lot of friends that want to go down because of that, so we just bring a whole crew with us, and
we'll get the kill.
Just go down there for fun, and we'll have a different rig. We'll have better equipment. We'll have DJI Osmos.
We'll be experienced.
Yes.
Seasoned.
Yes, we'll be ready.
We're ready. Fabiano, let us know when we should go down.
Yeah.
We're ready.
Well, make sure to like and subscribe, leave a comment, leave a review. Let us know if there's a topic you want us to cover on future Global Guardians episodes, and we look forward to seeing you back here again.
See ya.